Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation, brought to you, as always, by the Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X is Toyota's brand new all-electric SUV that is designed to go the distance for you and your family. The BZ4X is packed with Toyota's coolest tech, but it still has that trusty SUV feel you know and love. And even though it's electric, it's capable of effortlessly conquering any terrain, whether it's rain, snow, mud, or your friends' questionable post-game recaps. The BZ4X will get you through it all. Harm, I bet you wish you had a BZ4X when I was playing you in basketball last night.
Yeah, well, so two things on that, right? And for the people that aren't aware, Quaz beat me in arcade basketball. Number one, never claimed to be any good at it, right? I said that you'd go down, but I was implying that other people would play you and beat you. I wasn't making the claim that I'd be the one to step up. So that's an important distinction. And for the record, you didn't play anybody else there. So hiding a little bit there. And number two, I would crush you in a game of actual basketball. So you can have your little arcade victory. But until we meet one-on-one in the court, just know that I would completely dominate you.
Well, I gotta say, I played one game of arcade basketball against you. I was gassed by the end of it. Those machines at Greta, you get bang for your buck. My goodness, that went on for like 3-4 minutes, just nonstop shooting, and I was gassed by the end of it. I had a sore back. I'm feeling a little banged up today. It's just the price of being a star athlete. That's what happens, right? And that's the thing. I told you after, if anybody challenged me, I would have taken the challenge probably, but I also, after I beat you and was tired and banged up, I was like, all right, it's time to retire. That's what athletes do. When our bodies hurt that badly after performing and we know we can't do it at the highest level anymore, we step away from the game. And that's what I did.
Yeah, when you get up there in age, your
Right.
body starts breaking down, right?
That's right. My prime was 60. My age 16 through 19 was my prime years, and now I'm at 24 years old. I'm hitting my end. The end of the road is in sight for me when it comes to my arcade basketball sales. But I put up some good numbers, and so did the rest of us with the Greta watch party. It was a lot of fun. We raised some money for Canuck Place Children's Hospice, gave away some signed jerseys. It was awesome. I almost called them uniforms. Signed jerseys. It was a lot of fun over there at Greta Bar YVR. We had a blast. We had a great time. Thanks to everybody who came out. Special shout out to Travis Wall, who's in our chat almost every day. Special shout out Jeremy Lee, who we got to meet in person as well. We got to meet some fine folks in the YouTube live chat, and it was awesome to get to see so many Canucks fans in one place. And unfortunately, the Canucks did not get it done. Let's break down the game, Harm, which we both had a bit of trouble paying attention to. This breakdown of this game is brought to you by our friends at Four Winds Brewing, family owned and operated in Delta, home to the Four Winds Light Lager, a crisp, clean, and easy drinking beer. A beer for everyone, a perfect beer for before, after, or during the game. Ask for Four Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store, or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. All right, Harm, as I alluded to, kind of hard to pay attention to the game with everything that was going on at Greta. It was a wild time, but we did pay attention to the game, and what we saw was a 5-2 loss. I put in the show description 4-2 loss. Like, for some reason, I just thought it was 4-2. They lost. It was 5-2. They lost by a final score of 5-2 because obviously the Kraken added that empty netter. I just took that out of my memory completely. I thought this game ended 4-2. 5-2 victory for the Seattle Kraken over the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, it was an ugly one, right? Let's not beat around the bush there. They were out-battled. They clearly were tired with their third game in 4 nights. They were sloppy with the puck, without the puck. And here's the thing. With this 4-game losing streak, you could take some silver linings from the other games, but this performance lacked inspiration. That was one of their worst performances of the year. We heard how upset Tocchet was after the game, and rightfully so. Of course, you have to know there was the big difference in rest. When you consider how much the Canucks have played recently over these last 2 weeks compared to Seattle, heading into this game, they'd played 1 game in their last 6 days, 5 games in all of February. But then the other side of the coin, too, is that, yeah, this is a tough stretch. They're a bit tired, but also the Canucks were just coming off the All-Star break and had, even the lead up to the break itself, other teams were playing, and the Canucks had the entire week off. So they, coming into this difficult stretch, had plenty of time to rest, which you don't normally get mid-season. And yeah, there are some concerns with this team right now. The power play, which I'm sure we're going to dive a little bit deeper into, feels like the penalty kill is disintegrating. Um, they were losing every 50-50 battle. Seattle was just fast. They were tenacious. They were doing everything that Vancouver does when the Canucks are at their best. The lines outside of the JT Miller one were just, there was nothing cooking offensively. They weren't generating enough chances. Even on that line itself, I mean, you're going to give obviously RC Baines. Like, I thought he was fine in that role, not particularly great, not particularly poorly, but even when we point out that, okay, the Miller line had a great game, I thought it was honestly just JT Miller that was driving some offense. He's been terrific in this stretch, but outside of that, there just haven't been enough parts of this lineup firing. We also saw Ilya Mikheyev drastically reduced ice time. Feels like he's really entering Rick Tocchet's doghouse. A lot of negative storylines coming out of it, and it's not ideal that tomorrow they have to go up and face Boston with a national game. It's going to be a lot of attention on them, a lot of pressure. This is going to be a big test for them.
It's going to be a huge test. And look, let's break down, because I think we're going to get to the Boston game a little more in anyone else. You were at Canucks practice, which did happen today. The Canucks did practice today, folks, and we're going to talk about that a bit in Under the Hood later in the show. But I think during anyone else, we'll talk more about the Boston game. The one thing I want to talk about, Harm, is Arshdeep Baines. Like you said, thought he played fine, but you asked me last night. We were at Greta, as you can tell by my voice. We were at Greta. You asked me what I thought of Arshdeep Baines. I said, he's fine, but you can see why Phil Kessel is getting a look in Abbotsford, right? Like, Phil Kessel would not be a huge downgrade from who the Canucks are putting out there in their lineup right now. Whether that, and this isn't a shot at Baines at all. I'm just saying that, like, you've got Baines, you've got Suter, and now you've got Mikheyev, who Mikheyev is obviously a tier below at this point, where it's not hard to believe that Phil Kessel is getting a long look, where you're looking at winger depth and saying, yeah, okay, this guy might be able to actually help us. It makes sense now. Like, it makes a lot of sense why this team is looking. And I mean, this is a point I made when the Kessel rumors first came out and everything. But yeah, I'm looking at the winger depth and I'm saying, okay, yeah, you can see why a guy like Phil Kessel is getting a look in Abbotsford right now, and why, honestly, like he'd be in the Canucks lineup right now. I don't think that's crazy to say. Like, I don't think it's hard to say that there'd be a home for Phil Kessel right now in the Canucks lineup.
Yeah, and when I look at the lineup right now, I really need to see more from Pettersson and Lindholm. Höglander seems to bring the energy every night. You notice his forechecking, you notice his skill set. But that's always going to be in a complementary role when we're talking about a top six opportunity for him. Pettersson and Lindholm are the established players. They're the all-stars. And it feels like they haven't really developed any of the chemistry that we thought they would have when Lindholm was first acquired, right? I mean, Pettersson, we spoke about how we liked his performance in the Colorado game, how he was stronger on the puck, he was driving play, even though he didn't end up with production. But it was another quiet, I thought, night for him outside of the one pretty play off the rush where he set up Höglander. I think it might have been in the second period. Outside of that, there wasn't a lot. And this is what I keep coming back to. Even if you're not producing, I want to see him creating chances, driving a play, winning battles. And there just hasn't been enough of that. And you're also seeing that in that line's underlying numbers in plenty of these losses outside of the Colorado game. Lindholm as well. I mean, of course, he's been absolutely through the ringer at this point when you think about him being in Cabo when he was traded, then Toronto All-Star Week, then trying to get accustomed to new teammates, new system, new roles on the power play and the PK. The Canucks are also on the road, so he hasn't had a lot of practice time. It's a tough opportunity, tough opportunity for him to try and take, and you do cut him some slack, but I just don't notice him on enough nights in terms of the driving offense aspect. Yeah, he wins a lot of draws, but I want to see him delivering more. And this is where Tocchet at practice today was sort of asked about them. And I'm not expecting anything to change imminently, but Tocchet did start wondering out loud about, okay, are they a fit together? It seemed like he was second guessing whether at some point he may have to go to separating them. And he brought up the fact that they're both kind of natural centermen, and sometimes it's an adjustment moving from center to wing. But the problem you run into is, even if you wanted to separate those guys, that only would further expose your lack of impact wingers. So then the other aspect too is, I mean, the bottom six has gone from a major strength to a weakness. The Dakota Joshua's injury is obviously a huge aspect of it. It's rare to see Connor Garland at the bottom of the pile when it comes to controlling shots and that line's play driving, yet that's what happened in the Seattle game. But also Nils Höglander, because he stepped up the lineup, the fourth line just really doesn't have much going. I know Lafferty scored, but
on the third line, he was getting a shift with the third line when he scored that.
So it really feels like there are some areas of concern. I'm not in crisis mode. I'm not in panic mode, but there are problems that need to be fixed.
We got a lot of interaction in the YouTube live chat, folks. Thanks so much. We had some people at the live party, the watch party, saying they had a great time. Thanks for that. And a lot of people have some good stuff. We've got a heater trade proposal already. We're going to get to it in anyone else. Wyatt Arndt's going to join us in a matter of moments. But Harm, anything else that you wanted to touch on with that loss in Seattle? Because we've got a bunch of audio from Tocchet, and I thought it'd be appropriate to get to that. So Grady, just hit us with these clips here. Also, I didn't even introduce us. Dave Quadrelli, Harman Dial, and our producer, Grady Sass, who's standing by, and he's got a lot of audio for us from last night. So Grady, let's start with just Tocchet's raw reaction to the loss last night.
It's not just leadership. You're looking for everybody. I don't care who you are. Just worry about your game. Everybody's capable of doing things, but are we willing to do it? Right now, there's some games there, and I don't want to. Like I said, I thought we played good in Colorado, Minnesota. Whatever, 5-4, 3-on-2s, whatever, 5-on-3s. So it's not been horrible. I don't want to go crazy because of this game, but we've had some 4 or 5 guys have no shows here at 4 or 5 games. They got to pick it up. They got to do something. You have to. You can't just sit the bench and do nothing.
Okay, so a lot of no-shows is the one that we want to get to. That was the quote. That was the quote that really stood out for me.
Yeah, and it's like, honestly, throughout the lineup, there are a number of players right now that just aren't playing at their best. I mean, Mikheyev's the one that we've been talking about a lot, but even on the Miller line, you want to see more from Brock Besser. And I know in I think it was the Colorado game where he made the gorgeous pass to set up Miller, but Besser is a goal scorer first and foremost, and there hasn't been enough there. We touched on needing more from Lindholm and Pettersson. The fourth lines are not getting it done. There are a lot of areas with this group that, especially in the most recent Seattle game, where guys just weren't playing up to their ability level. And forget even the no-shows aspect. One observation that I've had for a while, and I know it doesn't tie directly into specifically the Seattle game, but we just haven't had a chance to talk about it in general, is even on the back end, I look at somebody like an Ian Cole, and I remember having this conversation with Patrick Johnson in the press box during one of the recent home games. Through the first 20 to 25 games, it felt like he was the steadiest rock with the bottom 4, especially when Soucy had initially gone down. Cole was just so noticeable, whether it was the PK at 5-on-5. You noticed him multiple times every day, or every game, because of a smart defensive play, breaking up a pass, blocking a shot in a high danger area. He just seemed to bring some of the defensive savvy that the Canucks seemed to lose when they originally lost Edler and Tanev. But Ian Cole's play has started to, I think, I don't want to say it has slipped a little bit, right? It's not problematic, but here's a guy that was sort of holding the bottom 4 together, and now he's been fine. He's been average. I don't think his puck play has been as sharp. He's had some turnovers. And like, that's even an area to me that I'm looking at and going, okay, the Canucks could really use Carson Soucy.
Carson Soucy, his name came up yesterday as well. And it's very hard to disagree with that when you bring up Ian Cole, someone who struggled just a little bit, but has struggled. And like you said, hasn't been unplayable by any stretch of the imagination, but when you hear rumors about the Canucks looking at defensemen, it's not very hard to believe and see why they would want to do that. Garland had the fight. We're not going to get to that. We're not going to get to that one. We'll probably ask Wyatt about that. And Wyatt is going to join us now. Wyatt's Hit is brought to you by the Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool game. Wendy's is letting you win real food with your fantasy teams this year and Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool Fantasy. For those of you who smoke the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning. Download the Wendy's app and score yourself 150 bonus reward points on your first order and grab a sweet victory from the mouth-watering jaws of defeat along with some fresh, never frozen beef. Sign up to play Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool Fantasy to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. Cue that music.
That was good. Fantastic music to be getting on the program. This is the best intro yet, you guys. Gotta say, you guys are Grady. Thumbs up. There's thumbs up.
So Wyatt, we were rizzing it up big time last night. The three of us.
Riz. Yeah.
So much Riz in one room. It was a good time at the watch party. Let's start with that. Your thoughts. That was your first Canucks Army watch party, was it not?
It was, yeah, I know. It was actually, I packed it in pretty good there, boys. And I got to say, I know it's a weird thing with the Greta washrooms are like top notch. Like, because the Cabby's really close. The Cabby's got some of the worst washrooms in all of Vancouver. But the Greta, it's like individual stalls. They've got delightful soap dispense, all clean. So that's the way to my heart. So yeah, shout out to Greta. That was a good time and good food. And it's good seeing everyone there and just chatting up. And got to meet Trent and it was fun, and Tyson. So it's good to put some names to faces.
It was a great time. It wasn't all good for the Canucks, as we saw at that watch party while we were watching the game. Just your thoughts on last night's game.
Yeah, I mean, they do look tired, right? They look like a tired team. But there is a difference between a tired team that's still trying to make things work and a tired team that maybe is kind of like, we're kind of tired. Like, they kind of buy into the fact they're tired to give themselves a bit of a break. And that's what it kind of felt like. And I think that's what Tocchet kind of alluded to. Like, hey, like, you know, there's gonna be some tough times ahead, and like this is nothing compared to what the playoffs are going to be like. So, and I've said it in the stanchions before. Tocchet loves tests. It's all about tests. You know, you're learning from it. So this is a very good kind of learning thing to get through. It's a tough stretch. I said before the game they're going to go to 5-game losing streak. I don't think they're winning against Boston. I just think it's going to be too much of a too short turnaround. But I do think they will bounce back. But it's definitely a thing where, you know, Tocchet did the nice thing of saying, "Oh, it's on me for not getting them prepared," but you know he's going to have this team like that was, you know, not good enough. And he's right. There were some guys that were invisible, and I've been on Mikheyev's case for a while now, and he, you know, the stats he's came through and showed that was one of Mikheyev's worst games. You know, so Mike pointed out too, like he has not been good enough for the amount of money he gets paid. It kind of reminds you a bit of the Benning era, where you've got a guy that's getting paid, you know, $4+ million on your fourth line now, and that's not a spot you want any team to be in, especially one that's trying to go far in the playoffs.
There's been a lot of conversation recently around the power play, a lot of different theories. What are you noticing with the man advantage and why it's lacking effectiveness right now?
I think part of it is, like, you know, could just be luck. Like, you know, that's always the thing that we always kind of forget. But it just feels like watching this team that they are overthinking things a bit. And like Hronek's kind of the poster child for overthinking things. I remember there's the first period against the Kraken. He has the puck inside his blue line, not power play yet, but he's inside his own blue line. And he's looking to make the perfect pass for at least, you know, a second, and then doesn't get it out. And then they're hemmed in for 2 minutes. And that's the kind of emblematic of what's going on. Like, they're overthinking things. They're making these passes. They're bobbling the puck, but it's adding fatigue, overthinking, luck. And I think that's what's kind of coming together now to make it look really bad. And even that being said, like, I'm not trying to bury Hronek here, but I don't think that guy's the answer. Like, I know the 2D in the power play is a bit archaic. And I don't think he's got, you know, the speed to really, I know that the crossover with Hughes, they works really well, but I just don't think he's the guy out there. And he's got a good shot, but he's not a guy like Salo who's going to kill you with that shot, right? He's not getting off quick enough. So I think, you know, we joke about Kuzmenko was a stir that maybe the straw that stirred the drink, but I just think back then they were just like, their puck movement was a bit crisper. They were getting shots off. And, you know, everyone's going to be talking about it. JT Miller with the half wall seems to be a bit more effective for them when they have him kind of skating into it, right? Like, I just feel like Hronek, and you were mentioning Harman last night, like Hronek on the half wall. Sorry, Hughes on the half wall. I don't think that's the best use of him. Like, it really isn't. Like, he's distributing the puck and letting him kind of, you know, free will around is the best use of him.
Connor Garland got into a fight. Didn't go super well. Your thoughts on Connor Garland dropping the gloves with Brendan Tanev?
He cut Tanev. Like, that was UFC style. Tanev was unleashing, like, I was watching, like, what is going on? Like, that would look like it was personal. And I know there was the poll that came out, like Garland's got one of the most punchable faces. Like he just gets under people's skins, and we don't. Maybe he's saying things softly and whispering things, right, like the Alex Burrows style. But he seems to get under people's skin and fighting. I know JT Miller got all like you went to the boxing, a little fist bump, like yeah, way to go. And there's a level of fighting that is good for the team. But we just saw Dakota Joshua go with an injury for a while because of a fight. Connor Garland, you don't necessarily need him going in a fight right now. Like this is the time where like I get it, you want to push back, but I just don't think he needs to be fighting. And it's not like he's a big guy either. So like imagine Garland gets injured. All of a sudden, like that third line has been such a boon to this team. That third line has saved them so many times this year. Like you just gotta get that line back together. Don't fight. Niels Amon, what are you doing, buddy? Just get in there. Like that, jump in. That could be his job, right? Like he hasn't done much lately. Like leave the fighting to the fourth liners at this point.
Yeah, no kidding. Dakota Joshua, you mentioned it. He's also out. That was the first thing I thought of was, okay, what if both of these guys go down? How much is this team missing Dakota Joshua right now?
It's always tough, right? Because we're going at like a 4-game losing streak kind of. We're looking at everything kind of on the table, and you're like, what's wrong? What's causing this on that? And so it is easy to point to Joshua, and maybe we're heightening his, disappearance from the lineup, maybe a little too much. But I do think it is an impact for sure, because I think him and Garland kind of had some chemistry, and the whole third line does. But like Garland, as we've seen, he's really good at high danger passing. He's really good at setting people up, and I think Dakota figured out how to play with Garland. He knows how to use that space that Garland creates for you, and he takes the puck to the net hard. And I think about like he's the guy that drives the net. And you look at it like once Dakota's out of the lineup, like every once in a while Lafferty will drive to the net, sure, but like Dakota's the guy that drives that puck. JT Miller as well, but Dakota will on that third line will just drive to the net. And so Garland gives him space, he would just drive to the net. So missing that aspect of that line, like they're trying to fit guys in there who can do that same thing, and no one's kind of fitting in the same way. And yeah, maybe they're playing well defensively at times, but like they were getting the offense as well. That's why that line was so lethal. And so without Dakota there, like they're just, and fair enough, some guys are kind of fit into that. It's going to take a while, but for a team that's trying to like keep the Edmonton Oilers in the rearview mirror, like that has been a huge loss for the team.
There's been some debate these days about Elias Pettersson, his performance. Some people criticizing him pretty harshly, saying he's not worth $12 million, and not even in relation to the contract, but the point being that they're really disappointed with his play recently, whereas others are a little bit more forgiving and looking at it more from the sense of just, hey, it's a rough patch. Even star players go through highs and lows. Where do you stand with Pettersson's game recently?
Yeah, I mean, he's still putting up points. I think there's probably could be a bit more coming from him, but you're getting a lot of the comments that, people used to give the Sedins, like he falls down so much, like he's not showing up the big games, and people would try their own city would go after the Sedins, and near the end of the career, everyone's like, oh, the Sedins were great. Everyone else attacked them, like for forgetting that they themselves did the same things. And Pettersson, the same, getting a lot of that. He's falling down way too much. He's not doing enough. And I mean, you even look in Toronto, like Mitch Marner gets a lot of crap too. Like these top players, like again, there a lot's expected of them, and fair enough, but sometimes there is going to be a little too much where like you expect them to take over the league and be the top number one guy in the league. And I think it's just the white noise of his contract that's surrounding, because that's almost half the time the comment followed up with it. This guy wants $12 million from us. And it's like, that's kind of what's followed up with it as. And it's like, no one even really knows what's being said. They're just kind of taking like, reports and kind of like putting their own thoughts into it. And people are getting riled up. And I think overall though, Pettersson has, has he been the best this season lately? No. Can he play better? For sure. But he's still one of their top players. And, that's the kind of guy that, come playoff time, I think him and JT Miller are going to be guys that are going to step it up. So I'm not worried about him, but I do think it's fair to say like, hey, like maybe you get a bit more out of him.
I wanted to ask you, kind of just looking at it big picture. We had someone in the chat, Nar, who threw this out about the skid being ideal. The boys just got swept and now they have to figure it out. Look at what happened to Boston last year with all their regular season success. Is that a bridge too far for you, or are you looking at this and saying, okay, there's some silver lining here potentially?
I do think it's good, because I think things have gone like that's the whole thing of the PDO. Like how many, like that. My favorite stat is like they are like the most lethal team off the rush. They just score goals. It always goes in. Like to them, like it's almost too easy at times. So I think they do need the idea of like, oh, we got to dig deep now. Like we're playing down goals. We're now, we're not getting the goals coming as easily, and we've got some injuries. Like because that's going to happen in the playoffs. It always happens unless you're the stupid LA Kings in 2012. You always get injuries. So it's going to happen to this team. They're going to find a way to fight through this. And again, like Boston is the perfect test, because that's like, in the playoffs, you're going to be down maybe 3-1 in a series, and that top team's still staying right across from you. So they got to treat this game almost as like, hey, boss, this is a perfect chance for us to go, hey, we're a playoff team. That's a top team across from the table from us. We got to figure a way out to not just like play well, but win this game. Like that to me is the biggest test they can have.
Wyatt, I love it. They practiced today. So again, we'll see. Jeff was there. Harman was there as well. we'll see how they respond tomorrow. But as always, thanks for doing this, Wyatt. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, boys. It was good rizzing up with you, and I'll see you at the next event.
Riz you later. All right.
Riz out.
See ya. Riz out. All right. That was Wyatt Arndt, who, as I mentioned, was brought to you by Wendy's. Okay. Lots to get to, Harm. What do we have here? I got to tell you about another sponsor of ours. That would be HSBC World Rugby Sevens, Western Canada's largest sporting event. This year is the 9th time the event has visited Vancouver as part of the World Rugby Sevens series. Tickets are on sale now at vansevens.com, starting from just $40 per day. And if you want to go, we've got a 4-pack of tickets for the entire weekend to give away. Text hashtag sevens, that's SEVENS, to 778-402-9680 for your chance to win. We will be giving away a 4-pack each week until the event. Text hashtag sevens to 778-402-9680. And folks, the event is this weekend, so enter to get tickets. Buy your tickets. Make sure you get on down to BC Place this weekend for 3 full days of jam-packed partying and rugby action. All right, Harm, time for you to cook. You've got something for us on Under the Hood, brought to you by Mr. Lube.
Yeah, so after practice at UBC today, J-Pat asked Rick Tocchet about the idea of bringing JT Miller back to the left flank, perhaps why we haven't seen it to this point again. And Tocchet had an interesting answer. He said that a lot of penalty kills are playing a diamond formation against Vancouver's power play. And against a diamond formation, when you have Miller in that left flank, he's running straight into the right flank player of that diamond. And the problem there is that Miller doesn't have a left shot one-timer option in the middle like they did when Bo Horvat was here, because with his absence, they've mostly been restricted to right shot options. And if it's a right shot in that bumper option, JT maybe has a deflection option, but it's not a true shooting sort of lane, sort of option that he can defer to in the bumper in the middle of the ice. So that was, I think, an interesting explanation for why we haven't seen the Canucks go back to Miller on that left flank. Now, does that mean that they shouldn't experiment with it again? I don't know about that. I think at a certain point you have to try it again, just because even early in the season they had some success. But it does highlight to you the importance or the value that they lost when Bo Horvat left, that they don't have a left shot finisher in that spot, because Lindholm comes in, is great and has experience in that bumper role. But since he's a right shot, again, you don't have that one-timer option. And it just goes to show, I think, one of the challenges with fixing this power play right now. And you just hope that now the team is going to be back at home a little bit more, especially through later in March after their California road trip, that they're going to have more practice time. Hopefully that can be the key to getting the man advantage back on track.
This was in today's Scenes from Practice, courtesy of our pal Jeff Patterson, who, of course, as you said, asked the question. This was what Tocchet had to say. A lot of teams play the diamond penalty kill. If you watch, we've played against diamonds with Millsy there, and we've struggled with him on that side when we had a righty in the middle. Now he's talking about Suter, a lefty. They had a little bit of success. It's hard to have that mentality against a diamond because all you're doing is going into that diamond. And then he talked about how it's something they might have to tinker with and what's going to happen. But he did talk about the power play, kind of how the players need to take ownership here. He said, I think everybody has to take onus when the power play goes bad. Work ethic is something I think we can be a little bit harder to play against when we have the power play. Win those loose puck battles, get the puck to the net. Sometimes it's nice to get one of those deflection goals. That's kind of where we're at. Now, I was watching the power play last night, and I especially noticed this. It feels like they're moving into the outside, and always, what do we say? Okay, shoot the puck, move your feet. They shot the puck last night, but then they didn't move their feet to retrieve the puck. It felt like every time they shot, they were then losing the subsequent puck battle and allowing Seattle to clear the puck. And look, I know it's easier said than done, but you know, one of those things, and I've brought this up before, that made that 2011 power play so effective was the ability for Ryan Kesler to be the first on almost every puck, every rebound that like went below the goal line. Kesler was out there digging it out. And I remember them talking about this on the Kess and Juice podcast way back when, like, they used to have practices where Kesler would just have the puck deflect somewhere and he would literally just practice sweeping the puck back to one of the Sedins. Like, he was literally practicing doing that. And again, I'm not trying to say that Elias Lindholm or whoever's down low needs to become Ryan Kessler, especially 2011 Ryan Kessler, but it's part of what makes a power play successful, right? Is, when you do one thing, you have to do the other things too. And right now I'm looking at the Canucks puck retrievals on the power play and saying, okay, that can definitely be improved. That was Under the Hood, brought to you by Mr. Lube, the pioneer of the no appointment warranty approved oil change, now providing appointment free tire service and sales. Find them at one of their 16 locations across the Lower Mainland. To find your nearest location, visit them online at mrlube.com. All right, Harm, cook us up with an anyone else segment, because I've got a lot to talk about today in the chat. Get your anyone else's in, folks. There's so many already. I'm excited to get to all of them.
It's time for anyone else, presented by DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat. And it's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when they download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms apply.
All right, the first one from Karan. Would Hogs be a good fit for Power Play 1? He can retrieve pucks so well and be a dog at the net front.
I don't think so. Look, he's a left shot, but the thing with Höglander is I don't necessarily think that the net front area has been their biggest issue or concern right now. And with Höglander, I think it would take him time to sort of learn the tendencies of how those top unit guys play. He doesn't have a lot of power play experience in general in the NHL. I just think the learning curve would be quite significant, especially because Höglander isn't the type of guy that, for instance, has the most lethal shot from distance or from the middle where you're like, okay, why not use him in the bumper? Like, that would have been the one spot where if I was thinking, okay, Höglander's left shot, maybe he could fit in the bumper, but the bumper requires some pretty high level reads. It's a position that requires a lot of experience in terms of reading off of the defense, where sometimes you have to pop a little bit higher in the slot to make sure you get open. It also requires a lot of quick decision making, because when you do get the puck in the middle, sometimes you have to make the quick pass. It's just a high pressure position for a guy that doesn't have a lot of power play experience. And I'd be shocked if the Canucks go down that route.
I'm going to disagree a little bit and say that if you're looking for a left shot, which presumably they would be, right? Presumably they would be at this point. I would try him there over P.S. Suter, right? Like, I think that's where I'm at least, is, yeah, you need experience, but I also think Höglander has enough natural ability that it wouldn't be like the bumper. I agree with you. Bumper is very hard to learn, but like net front, I could see Höglander being a fit there. And I mean, he looks okay there on PP2, right? Like, that's where he's playing on PP2. And I thought he's looked pretty good there. And I just think with all the issues that the Canucks power play is having, again, how long can you wait for them to figure it out before you start making more personnel changes, right? And I flat out disagree that Filip Hronek's the answer. I know you agree with me on that, but yeah, I just don't think Filip Hronek's the answer. I would try Höglander sooner than I would put Filip Hronek back out there. And I know he's not necessarily one or the other. I'm just saying that that's what I would do, is I would at least try Nils Höglander. So I agree with Karan on that one. We got this one for you, Harm, from Ty David. Can the Canucks pick up Tommy Novak, and what might the price be? Harman, I have to ask you again, just like Bobby McMahon, who the hell is Tommy Novak?
Novak is he's a right shot sniper who plays center. He really caught my eye last season. He had 17 goals and 43 points in 51 games. He missed some time with injury this year. He's got 29 points in 46 games. I don't know if he's the right fit, honestly, for a team like Vancouver. He does have some defensive deficiencies. He's 26 years old, so he's not that young, but you have to keep in mind this is only his second full NHL season. And when you're a team that has cup aspirations, I do think there would be a learning curve. And again, he's a center. So, I mean, I'm sure you could shift him over to wing at some point, but the Canucks also are running into an issue right now where Elias Lindholm, who's a natural center, him going back to wing, which he has a lot of experience playing, hasn't been working out. So As much as I love Novak's shot from distance, he can absolutely snipe the puck. I don't think he's the perfect fit for this team.
Ty David saying Brock was talking him up on Spit and Chicklets. They're buddies from way back. And as I look at Tommy Novak's Hockey TV page, both from St. Paul, Minnesota. Vetrano is what BC Bud said. Go get Vetrano, would be nice with PD. I'm on the Vetrano train. I haven't banged the drum hard enough like I did with Lindholm. Maybe I shouldn't bang the drum hard again, but Vetrano, I like the idea of Frank Vetrano coming to this team. Top G asks, what would be a reasonable price for Chris Tanev? Would that move the needle? Actually, he said Tanev. Top G, you're going to have to specify if you mean Chris Tanev or Brandon Tanev. I'm assuming you mean Chris Tanev. Although Brandon Tanev would be nice on this team too, right? Like, he'd be nice. He already fought Connor Garland, which that's the criteria for being a great line mate for Connor Garland, is if you fight Connor Garland, you're going to be a great line mate for him, because that's what happened with Dakota Joshua. So, look, I love the idea of Brandon Tanev on this team. That would be a bigger price, obviously, because Seattle is kind of, they've built their team around Brandon Tanev. They really, really like Brandon Tanev down there in Seattle. I don't know about built their team, but you know what I mean. He's a pretty integral part of their team. He does mean Chris Tanev. He has clarified that. The price for Chris Tanev is rumored to be a first-round pick. We haven't heard anything to suggest otherwise. I wonder, like, if the price for Chris Tanev, Harm, and this is just how I understand NHL kind of negotiations to go. If we keep hearing that the price for Chris Tanev is a first-round pick, the price for Chris Tanev is a first-round pick at least, no team has met the Flames' need. Like, no, I'm not willing to say no team has offered a first-round pick yet, but I think it's fair to say no team has offered anything close to what the Flames are looking for Chris Tanev. So at some point, because you also have to remember that Calgary's dealing from a position of weakness to some extent with him being a UFA, right? But this is how the rental market works, is you take the best offer and you hope that those teams get into a bidding war. And I think there will be a bidding war for Chris Tanev, right? And also from the Flames perspective, if they're getting offered, something that isn't quite up to par or is just on the cusp, that they're like, okay, we will accept this, but we're going to wait until closer to the trade deadline to see if the price goes up for other teams or if we get better offers. You understand that to some extent, but everything we've heard is that Chris Tanev's price is a first-round pick.
Well, it's either going to be that or Tanev's market value. Sure, you could argue could be as high as a first-round pick when you consider that Ben Sherratt went for a first-round pick as a rental to Florida at the deadline not too long ago. David Savard in 2021 went for a first-round pick to Tampa. But in both situations, you could argue that those were overpayments. Sherratt was a flop in Florida. Even in Savard's case, yes, Tampa won the cup, but Savard was averaging like 14 minutes a night in the playoffs. He wasn't making the impact that the Lightning thought he would, even though he had a similar shutdown profile as Tanev and had been logging huge minutes for Columbus. On the other hand, you could also point out that Josh Manson, for example, the year that he got moved to Colorado, went for a second-round pick and a prospect in Drew Hellison, who was decent but nothing spectacular. Or when Toronto acquired Mark Giordano a couple years ago, back when Giordano was, again, in a top-4 role decisively for Seattle, he went for a package that included 2 seconds. So it's not a guarantee that Tanev's worth a first. Yeah, if I'm in Calgary's position, I'm asking for a first-round pick. But as we get closer to the deadline, if nobody's prepared to meet that, I think the check down would be a second-round pick plus another asset. And that's where, from the Canucks perspective, like, you've already traded a first-round pick for, plus Hunter Brzustevich as part of that Lindholm trade for a rental. And I know in Tanev's case, there is the possibility that you could keep him beyond this year, but you've already made a huge swing, and you've got to be careful not to give up too many of your prized assets, because it could prohibit you from being able to make crucial deadline adds in future years. Because, teams to win a cup, they need usually a runway. They don't usually win it on their first go into the playoffs. So as much as I like the fit for Tanev, and as much as I'm on board with the idea of circling back with him in free agency when you wouldn't have to pay to get him if the contract's reasonable on a short-term deal, I'm just not sure that I'd be prepared to pay the acquisition cost from Vancouver's perspective, knowing that there could be a bidding war.
Fair enough. Wallach asked this: do you think Baines is positioning himself for more time in the lineup, given how he has played the past few games? If he can keep up this level of play once injuries are done, I'm going to say yes. I think right now, first of all, the fourth line seems just completely open for the taking. Like, I think the Canucks are begging for someone to do something to earn ice time on the fourth line. And look, I know Nils Amon kills penalties and he's been pretty good in that role, but when Niels Höglander's off that line, that whole fourth line's identity is just gone. And I know, Sam Lafferty scored last night as part of the third line when he was out with Bluger and Garland, but that was a deflection, right? Like that was a pretty lucky bounce. At the watch party, I got very excited about it, but it was a bit of a lucky bounce for Sam Lafferty there. And you got to be good to be lucky. He's going to the net. I'm not trying to take it away from Sam Lafferty, but yeah, I think Baines has a shot to play in the lineup. I absolutely think he has a shot to play in the lineup. If you're playing top 6 minutes, which he was last night, and again, he's hard matched against McKinnon for his first game, that's a pretty solid stint through 2 games of your NHL career. That's a pretty strong showing. So again, I'm interested to see how long he can kind of keep it up. And look, I think he was a little bit worse last night than he was in the first game, but I don't want to over dissect Arshdeep Baines games here. He hasn't been the problem, and I'm interested to see what the future kind of has in store for him. But yes, I think he has a real shot at keeping himself in this lineup when everybody's healthy. Jesse C asked this: fully healthy, does your starting 6 defenseman core change depending on who you play in round 1? I'm going to say no, because if everybody's fully healthy, it seems pretty clear how the Canucks are going to position their defense. Like, we've already established Carson Soucy is going to be in this lineup. Again, who you play, I don't think it matters too much about who the opponent is. I think what matters more is who's playing well for you at the moment, because then you have to decide between Noah Juulsen, Ian Cole, Tyler Myers is really the realistic conversation, and Nikita Zadorov as well. For one of those guys isn't going to be able to play in the lineup because you're not going to have room. You would think Soucy, Hughes, and Hronek are the untouchable ones in the lineup that aren't coming out, and then you kind of have to figure it out beyond there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you nailed it. It really is going to come down to players' form down the stretch. I don't think who you're playing opponent-wise would necessarily make a huge impact on your decision in terms of your stylistic preference.
Jesse C, best haircut from the Swedish prospects in the system. They all seem to rock various versions of the Dolph Lundgren, Ivan Drago haircut. This is a really good question. It's one that requires probably a lot of attention and research. So I'm going to give it the vibes one, as I normally do. I really like Tom Willander's haircut. Like, I think Tom Willander had a fresh fade when I saw him at Dev Camp.
Yeah, I think I have to go with him as well. I'm trying to look up, like, I've seen the other Elias Pettersson's haircut now. It's not bad, but there's something fresh about Willander, and not just his haircut, but I'll say this. I met him at the Combine when I had heard that the Canucks had taken him out for dinner and that he was on their radar. And just having a chance to talk to him in person, again, you could see why teams were so impressed that week in Buffalo with his draft Combine interviews, because he is a really confident, impressive young man. The way he presents himself, he just seems so sure of himself, so sure of every decision he's making. Like when he was walking through his explanation for why he was leaving Sweden to go play in the NCAA, which isn't very common for a prospect, a Swedish prospect that young. The way he delivered that explanation, I can just imagine the Canucks brass, other teams in and around that top 15 would have walked away really impressed. I know doesn't really have anything to do with his haircut, but when you meet him in person, he's an impressive guy. And again, in terms of how he presents himself, his professionalism, all that type of stuff.
I will say, if you Google Tom Willander, he's got some rough haircuts too. Me and him both. I'm not immune to it. In fact, Tom Willander also had the little, Oddish, the Pokemon, that the hair comes out like that.
Yeah.
That's, Tom Willander and I have both had the Oddish cut. Or is it Oddish? I don't know. Might be Oddish.
I don't know what it's called.
But anyways, you played Pokemon growing up, right?
No, Yu-Gi-Oh.
Oh, that's right. You're a Yu-Gi-Oh guy. And yet we do a podcast together.
I know. Pretty crazy, isn't it? Oh, yeah, Grady also pointed out I made a mistake. Novak's a left shot, not a right shot. But point still stands. I've seen some filthy snipes from him. Like, guy can rip the puck.
All right, Karan asked this. Who's your ideal potential opponent for round one? I'll tell you what, I said it yesterday before the game, and I say it again after the game. I don't want to meet Seattle in round one. I don't want the Canucks to meet Seattle in round one. I think that would be, I don't want to say disaster, but if you win the Western Conference, right, and you get the worst, the second wildcard team as your playoff opponent, and it's the Seattle Kraken, good luck. Like, I don't want to run into the Seattle Kraken in round one. That would not be a good thing for the Canucks. I don't like that. I like Nashville.
Okay, so this was about who we'd like to see, right? Not
who
avoid.
would you like to see them run into? Yeah, in round one. Who's the most ideal?
Okay, I'm gonna assume Calgary is not gonna make it, just for the purposes of this conversation. Although they're still kind of hanging around, they're 3 points back of St. Louis with an extra game played. But yeah, I mean Calgary, that would be ideal. But if not, Nashville to me definitely stands out. I mean, they are pretty consistently a team that can make the playoffs, but then fold pretty quickly in recent times. They don't have enough, I think, offensive depth. Their first line with O'Reilly, Nyquist, and Philip Forsberg has been really dynamic, but after that, they don't get enough offense. UC Saros hasn't really been his usual spectacular self. And the blue line, while it's decent, it doesn't scare me. There's just nothing really about that Nashville team that I look at and go, oh boy, that's terrifying. I don't like even with St. Louis, for example, some of the ways that they create offense off the rush, quick strike, you're like, okay, like that's not the greatest match for Vancouver. But with Nashville, it's like, yeah, they've got some decent players, but I'm not scared of Nashville.
Yeah. I would also say, like, and again, I don't know if we're going this low, right? Because like you brought up with Calgary, it might be cheating a little bit to bring up this team, but like Minnesota, Canucks could stomp Minnesota in a 7-game series. I know some Wild fans can clip this if they meet in round one and the Wild win, but yeah, like I think in my hierarchy, like I would go number 1 is Minnesota, number 2 is obviously Calgary, number 3 is Nashville, and then there's a big drop off where I don't think you want to meet St. Louis, and you don't really want to meet Seattle in round one either. And I think Seattle's kind of the one that I think would be, like I said, I keep saying quietly, a tough opponent. I think they would surprise a lot of people if Vancouver and Seattle met in round one. I'll give you one, Harm, because they're at risk of falling in the wild card standings. The LA Kings.
I wouldn't want to play LA either, to be honest. I know they've been spiraling, but that's a team that, for example, last year in the playoffs, they gave Edmonton a pretty tough test, even though Kevin Fiala wasn't healthy for most of the series. And he's their main offensive game breaker, right? Even the year before, when they were the surprise team, they took Edmonton to Game 7. And I know, yeah, okay, so what you're saying is that they were close, but they didn't win either time. Sure, but now I think on paper, they're an upgraded team, even though the standings results may not show it yet. I think when they're at their best, that Gavrikov-Roy second pair can be really, like, I've seen them play really effective shutdown hockey. And down the stretch, when they were first united, they were one of the best shutdown defensive pairs in the NHL. They've loosened up a bit recently, but they have the ability to build that chemistry together. And that's when you look at their blue line, and even though they don't have the biggest names, like, quietly, they can be really good in that sense. And especially, the forward situation they have with how many two-way pieces. I don't like the idea of Philip Deneau going up against, one of Vancouver's, whatever Vancouver's top line ends up being, because Deneau has this history of being able to shut down, whether it was Matthews when he was with Montreal and they made that surprise run, or, he's had some effective moments against the McDavid line. I don't love that. So, I'd prefer not to play LA either. Although I'm not saying like LA would be favorites by any stretch of the imagination, but again, I'd much rather in Nashville.
I absolutely agree with you. Nashville's the one. Nashville's the one. Like, that's the team that you want to hit. Cody Chong in the Facebook chat said, XL Energy Center is a house of horrors. No to that round one matchup. All right. I'll accept that. But I think we can all agree. Nashville is the team that you want to face. And again, some Nashville fan out there is going to find this if Vancouver and Nashville meet and Nashville bumps Vancouver out in round one. I think Nashville might be that team. I just don't know about LA's goaltending. I don't want to get into it, obviously, because it's just, it's a smaller conversation. But yeah, I think about LA, and I think you're right with the shutdown ability that they might have. They're going to put it together. If not all, they already kind of have started to put it back together after that disastrous skid that led to them firing their coach. They're starting to put it back together. And look, Quentin Byfield's not getting any worse. I think that's the other thing to consider, right? It's like, we've seen what Quentin Byfield's been up to this week. Like, that dude is not getting any worse. And again, yeah, they might be a team that you increasingly more every year don't want to meet in the playoffs, even though they did hitch their wagon to Pierre-Luc Dubois, which means they'll never win a cup. They'll still be kind of a team you don't want to meet, I don't think.
Yeah, and they're just a team that when they're at their best, they allow nothing defensively. So that to sort of talk about the goaltending aspect, yeah, I mean, it's obviously a potential concern for them, but when they are rolling, they can sort of follow that Vegas template of they have Aiden Hale back there. But if you don't allow anything off the slot, if you don't allow anything off the rush, as LA did for a good chunk before this recent slide, then your goaltender doesn't have to do much. It's a pretty predictable sort of environment system to play in. And LA's underlying numbers are really dominant in terms of controlling possession, controlling scoring chances. They do, even with Byfield improving, they do lack, like, I don't love the fact that they don't have any offensive stars. I still think they're missing the top of the lineup, like JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, types that Vancouver obviously does, but they're a deep team also in that their third and fourth lines can also be really solid and chip in. And so, yeah.
Anyone else from Cron? How is Grady's dog? How is Tilly? Grady, can you jump in? Or if Tilly's barking, we might not be able to hear from Grady.
She's doing okay. Sleeping right now. I'd bring her on otherwise. But yeah, growing up, man, it's crazy how quick they grow.
Yeah, Bert's also sleeping, so I can't get Bert either. Someone pointed out, and this isn't even true, Karan. I've done this before. I've brought Bert on the show. Karan said we've never actually seen Bert and Quads in the same room. Think about that. It's not true. I've lifted Bert onto the camera there. Anyways, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh chat, a lot of Pokemon chat, so I think it's a good time. Oh, Karan with another one. Quads was def a guy who always chose the fire type starter in Pokemon. Absolutely. Charizard. Why would I not want Charizard in the end? Come on. And yeah, even when it was the I don't remember the other names, but I did the last one I played, Greninja, was the one I started with, which was a water type Pokemon. But that was the last video game I played. I think it was like 2014. I don't know. Anyways, oh, there's Tilly. Look at the Tilly cam. Oh, big yawn. Adorable.
Look at the ears. Dumbo ears, I call them.
That's so cute. I love the ears. That's fantastic. All right, great. I know your hands are kind of full right now, but we will get to the Betway Bet of the day, brought to you, as always, by our friends at, you guessed it, Betway. I'm really excited for this weekend, Harm, just before we get to Betway, because we'll give Grady a little bit of time to put the dog down and get the bet up. I'm really excited for this weekend. I feel like the Canucks need a good weekend. We need a good weekend. We hardly even touched on the Boston game. I don't know what's going to happen, but 4 p.m. tomorrow, 4 p.m. start. It's going to be an interesting one for the Canucks, and we're going to be back on Monday to break it all down. What are you expecting to see in this game against the Boston Bruins?
It's going to be a tough test. I mean, we know what happened last time these two teams met. Vancouver got smacked, and it's especially going to be tough because Boston's special teams are really, really good. So you could run into another game where at 5-on-5, you get back to your staples, as Rick Tocchet would say. You are applying much better back pressure, allowing less off the rush. You're tightening up your defensive structure. You're more connected, breaking the puck out. You're able to force more turnovers on the forecheck. You're able to create some solid cycle shifts. You're getting a solid territorial edge. You could do all of those right things and still not win the game because Boston is elite on the power play and they're really effective on the PK as well. I actually want to specifically point out where they rank. I'm just quickly pulling it up in both categories. 7th best power play in the NHL and 10th best PK in the NHL. So the special teams battle, I think, is going to be the toughest part of this Boston game.
Yeah, I also think with the adversity the Canucks are facing right now, like, let's be honest, a 4-game losing streak is a ton of adversity. And I think there's going to be a lot of people out there that are saying, okay, well, this is going to be a loss. They're going to lose 5 straight, but then they're going to get a couple days off and they'll be able to come back and be ready for Tuesday's game. There's going to be people that are saying that, but I personally think that they have a serious chance here to erase all of the adversity that they've been facing with just a win over the Boston Bruins. People are asking for a prediction. I'm going to say, because I'm a giant homer, 3-2 win for the Vancouver Canucks tomorrow. And I know, Harman, you probably don't want to give a prediction, so it's okay. Yeah. We'll save it. We'll save it. I'll give it out there. 3-2 win for the Vancouver Canucks, because, again, I am a giant homer. All right, let's get to our bet way better
against the Canucks.
No, never. Actually, yeah, I did that one time, and I was right, but it was that one time. And I'm not doing it again. I'm not doing it. Positive vibes only heading into the weekend. All right, let's get to our bet way of the day, brought to you by our friends over at Betway. All right, Chicago Blackhawks, baby, to beat the Winnipeg Jets on home ice. They are defending the United Center. Connor Bedard scoring 3. Chicago Blackhawks to win in any fashion against those Winnipeg Jets. A $10 bet at plus 230 odds returns you $33 over at Betway. It must be 90 plus play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, folks, everybody have a great weekend. Thanks again to everybody who came to the watch party. For my co-host Harman Dial and our technical producer Grady Sass, my name is David Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harman and Quads, brought to you by the Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X's fresh look is just an added bonus to its range, since you can drive up to 406 kilometers on a single charge. That's enough to get you from Kitsilano to Whistler or Kamloops to Kelowna and back, and still be home in time for the game. Now that's what we'd call electric. The best part, by choosing electric, you can get up to $11,000 in rebates and incentives. The BZ4X are in stock and selling quickly, so make sure to visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer to get your hands on one. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.